radiology, and how to do counseling and examination stations. So our first speaker is none other than Dr. Manoj Agarwal, sir. He is a ENT surgeon and his special interest is in otology and lateral skull base surgery. He did his MBBS and ENT from Calcutta National Medical College. He was a gold medalist throughout. He was awarded Devjani Banerjee Memorial Medal, Ramchandra Sen Memorial Medal, R.N. Roy Chaudhary Gold Medal, and Major K.K. Ghosh Memorial Award. After doing his PG, he went to England for DLO RCS examination under the agencies of Royal College of Surgeons. Later, he went to Professor Mariusana also for 1 year. And during that time, he learned about basics of ear and lateral skull base surgery. And meanwhile, he also published 14 research papers. He is also a recipient of PSR Junior Consultant Award in 2004. Apart from academics, he is a big Bollywood fan. He was the semi-finalist of Bollywood Ka Boss, which was conducted by Boman Irani. He has delivered many lectures and demonstrated ear surgeries at various ENT conferences across India. Currently, he is the director of the Malleus Clinic in Kolkata, India. Personally, I have known Manoj sir since 2015, where we met in Kolkata. So he is a very good human being. He is very humble, very soft-spoken, and a very excellent teacher. The way of explaining difficult things is very good. So, and I'm very thankful to you, sir, because you accepted our request on a very short notice. So I would like to welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Thank
So
you.
You can start the session, sir.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Pratik. Too many words said there about me. I'm not very sure whether I've reached any such station in my life. I always think of the famous poet, British poet, Robert Frost. And I would like to start with those lines, his wonderful poem that the woods are lovely, dark and deep, and there are promises to keep, miles to go before I sleep. So there's a long, long journey which I still have ahead of me, and I hope to make some difference to this subject by the time I leave. I'm over and done with over here. Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Pratik. Thank you, Dr. Sriharsha, for inviting me. And I hope that this session is equally educative, informative, and more importantly, entertaining as the previous sessions have been. So what I have been asked to cover here is, Dr. Pratik, as I told you over the phone, since I've never taken a DNB exam, so I might not really follow what you want to know. So in case at any point of time you feel that what is being said is not actually in tune with what is needed by our friends over here, just feel free, right?
Correct.
That, so this is something else and this is what we are actually expecting.
Yes.
So, okay. I'll just give you a little basics of some of the things, and that's the reason why I've put this picture here. Can we all see the MR image that is there on my screen?
Yes, sir, we can see.
Right. Though I wanted to start off with CT, but there are certain basic concepts about the MR which tend to confuse us sometimes. And that is why I put in this MR picture. Now, this MR picture here is of the brain. And we know that usually the MR pictures are either T1 or T2. Believe me, the number of sequences that exist now in the world of MRI is humongous. And at least for me, who's not a radiologist, but just an otologist, a lateral cerebral base surgeon who has some extra interest in otology, to remember all those sequences is absolutely out of the question. But something very, very basic, that we know that on T2, the CSF is bright. But beyond that, is there anything else which can help me in differentiating a T2 image, a T2 weighted image? Now, the first thing, good, it's very good that I myself made this mistake. whenever as an examinee you get an MR image, do not call it a T1 image or a T2 image, please. The term should be T1 weighted image, T2 weighted image. Please remember that. This is very important, especially if the examiner is someone who has a background of radiology, or if there is some amount of radiology involved in what is being asked to you. If you just call it a T2 image, it's actually wrong, because every image in itself is in totality a T1 and a T2 image on an MR. So get into the habit of calling it a T2 weighted image, because that is where the T2 based tissues become more prominent, or the T2 based features become more prominent, and vis-a-vis the T1 weighted images. Now, we all know that on a T2 weighted image, the CSF is bright, correct? It is hyper intense. Again, on an MRI, it's the intensity. On a CT scan, it's the density. I used to make this mistake previously, and once in a while, even now, while making a presentation, while I'm in the flow of my talk, I make this mistake. You cannot use the word intensity in a CT scan, and you cannot use the word density in an MRI. So you have a hyper intense signal, an iso intense signal, and a hypo intense signal on an MR. Similarly, on a CT scan, it's an iso-dense, hyper-dense, and hypodense signal or an image. So, on an MR, we know that the CSF, these are the ventricles. So, we will not go into the details of the physics of the MR, because that is beyond the subject and beyond the purview of this talk, but still, and as I said, the MR sequences are so humongous in number that it's absolutely impossible for us ENT specialists to at least remember all of them. Anyway, so to come back, this is the ventricle which is filled with CSF. So the moment we see this image, we say that it's a T2 weighted image. Fair enough. But there can be some T2 weighted images wherein the CSF might be dark. Right? Can you see the CSF dark here? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can see.
Yes. So this is the ventricle. Okay. See, look at the right side. This is also T2, correct?
Yes, sir.
Right? This is also T2. And this was also T2.
Yes, sir.
So how come on one T2 the CSF is dark, and on the other T2 the CSF is rather hyper intense and iso intense, right? So what I'm trying to say is that the because there are certain images called the FLAIR images, FLAIR, fluid attenuated inversion recovery images. Those are the images wherein the CSF can be dark, but the T2 weight is maintained. So how do I know whether the image is a T2 weighted image or a T1 weighted image? For that, what we need to see is we need to see the cortex of the brain. We all know that in the brain, we have the gray matter and the white matter, correct? Now, the gray matter is more on the surface and the sulci and the gyri, whereas the white matter is deep inside, okay? Now, let's take a proper T1 image first and look at it. Just give me a minute. Yes. Now look at this T1 image. This is the gray matter. My cursor here, okay?
Yes.
This is the white matter. Is the contrast good enough for you to understand or appreciate the difference between the so-called color here? I'm using the very wrong term, but still I'm using it. Can you see the color of the gray matter and the color of the white matter? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Now on a T1 image, the gray matter appears grayer and the white matter appears whiter, which means that it follows the way it is in the brain. Okay, so if the gray matter appears gray and the white matter appears white, forget the CSF. The CSF is hypointense. Forget the CSF. It is a T1 weighted image. Are we clear?
Yes, sir.
So if the gray matter on the sulci and the gyri on the surface of the brain is gray, gray is gray, and white is white, one weighted image. Now let's go back to what's happening here. Can you see how the gray matter on the surface is appearing more white than the white matter which is appearing dark? Can we appreciate this difference?
Yes, sir.
Correct? So if the gray matter appears whiter than the white matter, it's a T2 weighted image irrespective of what the CSF says. So can we see the same thing here? Yes. Here, look on the right side, it's a T2 weighted image. Okay. But the CSF is black. But I could have thought if I remove this from here. If I remove this from here, I could have thought that it's a T1 weighted image. Yes, no. But what is the condition of the gyri and the sulci and the white matter here? The gyri and the sulci are whiter, and the gray matter and the white matter is grayer. So this definitely is a T2 weighted image. But it's a T2 weighted image wherein the CSF is dark. It's not hyper intense, it's hypointense. So it's a flare image. These are the three main sequences that one has to know as an ENT specialist, because flare images are very, very common and popular in the posterior fossa. Okay. So just because I'm probably sounding repetitive, just because the CSF is dark, it does not make it a T1 image. So if I bring back the annotations, I can see it's a T2 image with dark fluid, where the CSF is dark, and that's because of something called a flare sequence. As I said, fluid attenuated inversion recovery sequence. So this is the reason I wanted to start off with this, so that I don't forget this later on. And this is extremely important, irrespective of whether you are an ENT specialist or whether you are a radiologist, because as ENT specialists, especially when we get MRs in our hand, whether it's for the anterior fossa, whether it's for a CSF leak or an anterior fossa tumor or a posterior fossa lesion, we tend to get a little shaky, which is absolutely acceptable and understandable. So this is the first thing that you need to know. And as I am repeatedly saying, do not say it's a T1 image. T1 weighted, T2 weighted. Don't ever think, get into the habit. Don't think that the other person is not a radiologist. So what will he know about a T1 or a T2 weighted image? I can always use the term, but it's a matter of habit. Okay. Now let's start with things simpler. Let's start with the CT scans. Okay. So again, the first thing that most of the time we want to know is whether it's a bone window. The first thing that people tend to ask is, sir, is this bone window or is this soft tissue window? Okay. So when the bone appears whiter, it is not a bone window. Okay. Another small trick. When the bone appears hyper intense, look at this image and look at this image. Does everyone agree here that the bone here is much more hyper intense compared to the bone here? Yes, no? Yeah?
Yes, sir.
So, but this is not, this is actually the bone window and not this. This is the soft tissue window. Okay. So now let's look at this. The other thing that can help you not necessarily always, especially if you are being asked to see an image on the DICOM viewer, is if you look at the right side. If you look at the right side, it tells you what is the resolution, what is the level of the sections. These are 0.6 millimeter cuts, and this is with contrast. This is with contrast. Because it is with contrast, you can see these vasculatures here, the sinuses here, that's the transverse sinus and the lateral sinus, which has become prominent. You can actually, I'm not sure how good the resolution is, but you can actually see the blood vessels also. You can see the basilar artery here. Okay. So anyway, so this is what a bone window looks like compared to, yes, exactly, compared to a soft tissue window. Again, because this soft tissue window is with contrast, we can actually see these vessels all lighted up. These blood vessels all lighted up, right? So this is a soft tissue window with contrast. Even on a plate, if you're given an image on the view box, usually the dictum is that if you look at the right or the left, wherever this detail is given, you would find either the word contrast written, or you would find an annotation which says plus C, plus C. Okay, so that helps you. Don't just jump into the scan. Again, the same thing, you know. Yes, obviously during your exam you will not be given the entire series, you will be given one image. So we have to discount that possibility that we might make a mistake as far as sort of, you know, making a wrong diagnosis is concerned. Because as I have always told in my lectures, imaging is all about serial studies. If one image could suffice, why would the radiologists unnecessarily spend, I mean, sheets of the films and send you 4 plates or 5 plates or 7 plates or whatever? If one image could suffice and give you the entire diagnosis at one go, why would people send you CDs, or why would you ask for CDs with 1,000+ images? Because they have to be read sequentially. Anyway, so the thing is that before you go here, look here. There's a lot that you can garner from here. So if it's, for example, look at this, it says LARP. Now, in today's world, one really does not have to, you know, tell students or junior residents or youngsters just starting out on their practice as to which is the left side and which is the right side. Everyone is literally, I mean, it's a reflex action. It's a reflex action. It doesn't even need your cognitive senses. I mean, you see a scan and you know that this is the left side of the patient and this is the right side of the patient, because we're looking at the scan from the foot end. And obviously the nose is anterior and the head and the occiput is posterior, or whichever way it is. But there was a time when true coronals were done, and instead of hyperflexion, the patient was put into a prone position. The patient was put into a prone position for the true coronals. At that point of time, in fact, way about maybe 20 years ago or 18 years ago, there was a paper in publication in Laryngoscope. Mistakes made in the interpretation, especially of coronal CTPNS. The mistakes that were made in side determination, because at that point of time, since the reformatted images were not very popular, since not everyone had a new gantry with reformatted images, not everyone could do the entire scan with the patient supine in a comfortable position. And because every patient could not hyperextend their neck, sometimes they would do the coronals in the prone position, as a result of which the left actually became the right and the right actually became the left. But these days, you really don't need to bother about that. You are always reading the scans from the foot end. So you are always reading the scans from the foot end. So obviously the right hand of the patient is this side and the left hand of the patient is this side. And you need not be told that the nose is always anterior in human beings. What you see additionally here around here are again not that I'm also very much aware of, but some of them are to stabilize the head and also what is called the head coil, right? So we will not go into all that. Now, given an image like this, okay, given an image like this, what is it that you might, what is the information that you might garner? What is it that you might, suppose you are just asked, you're just left on your own and you are randomly told to describe this scan. So obviously you start off with number one, what is the section that you see? So it's an axial section, right? We know we have either an axial or a coronal or the oblique sagittal. So by now we all know that this is an axial section. You might say of the head, because we're not just seeing the temporal bone, we are seeing other parts as well. We're seeing the nose, we're seeing the nasal pyramid, we're seeing the sinuses, we're seeing the base of the skull and whatnot. So axial section, CT, HRCT, high resolution. Why am I saying high resolution? Because I know it's 0.6 millimeter. And if I've already seen contrast, I might as well add post contrast. Now the examiner asks you, why are you saying contrast? What makes you think it's a contrast? The annotations mention here that it's a contrast, but don't jump the gun and tell the examiner that I can see the blood vessels and the sinuses here, unless and until you are asked to. But if this says contrast here on the film, there is no harm in mentioning it. Sir, I can see contrast written here. So post contrast axial CT scan of the head. Now try to imagine at what level it might have been taken. That's a very important reference point. That's a very important reference point, because the next question from the examiner, if you don't say the level, if you don't ascertain the level, the examiner will ask you, so when you say the head, is it the calvarium or is it the atlanto-occipital junction or is it the mid-cerebral level? Where? Now, the unfortunate part over here in this particular scan is, and this is a fight that I keep having with my radiology friends here, as you can see that the scan is not perfectly aligned. When I say it's not perfectly aligned, what I mean is while here you see one set of structures, on the other side you see some totally different set of structures. This is a pretty bad scan done. While here you see the vertical carotid, internal carotid artery, here you see the horizontal internal carotid artery. What kind of a scan is it? It's a very bad scan as far as the alignment of the patient is concerned. Anyway, the point is you're not there to argue with your examiner. So you might say, if you look at this, you see the basal turn of the cochlea and you also see the vestibule. So you can easily say, sir, this is an axial, a post-contrast axial HRCT axial section at the level of the vestibule. That's it. So you have now created a scenario for yourself wherein you have put in a reference. So your question, and so if you do not mention anything beyond what is visible at that level, you will not be held responsible. So try to ascertain what the level is. Say, for example, let's look at this. And let's just concentrate on the left side in order to get our reference point. So, sir, this is an axial CT scan, post-contrast axial CT scan of the head, mainly focusing on the temporal region taken at the level of the superior upper part of the superior semicircular canal. Are we all on the same page here? Yes, no? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are on the same page, sir. Your
And
voice is little bit crackly, sir.
Yeah, I can also feel that. Is there anything that we can do about it?
No, sir. I think we can continue, sir.
Okay, just
Yes.
give me a minute. Just give me a second.
Yes, sir.
I'll try and attach my microphone.
Yes, sir.
Is it any better, Dr. Pratik?
Yes, sir, it is better, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir, it's better, sir.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me, sir?
Dr.
Sir,
Pratik?
yes, sir, it's better, sir.
Hello?
Sir, it's better, sir.
Hello?
Hello,
Hello?
can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I think the microphone is not working because I kept saying hello. I did not get a response. So I suppose the microphone is not working.
Yes, sir. So you can continue like this only, sir. No problem.
And is this the manner that you want it to be?
Exactly, sir, exactly.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So,
Sir, can you please repeat the bone section, the bone window and the soft tissue window? Because,
yeah,
yes, sir. Please, sir. Thank you so much.
right. See, it's very simple. It's not rocket science. We are not here to understand the physics behind CT and MR. That's for the radiologists, correct? It's as simple. When the bone appears brighter, is the bone brighter here or not? Do we agree on that? Hello, I can't hear. I think the connection is pretty bad today.
Yes, sir, it's brighter, sir.
Yeah, so this bone is much more shinier. I mean, there's more glare, correct? Compared to this. Okay?
Yes, sir.
But this is the bone window. Not this. Just because the bone is glarier, that's not the bone window.
Okay, sir.
The image that you see now is the bone window image. And the image that you see now is I'll just show you something. 1 minute. Give me a minute. Can you see this picture?
No, sir. We are seeing the same picture, sir. You have
Achha,
to,
I'll have to stop sharing and come back to this.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, 1 minute. Can you see it now?
Correct, sir. You can see.
Just forget what this bone algorithm. Let's not get into all that because then this lecture is going to become a marathon lecture, right?
Yes, sir.
See this. What does it say here? Brain window. What does this say? Bone window. Okay?
Correct, sir.
So in the brain window, the bone is more shinier than the bone actually in the bone window. Okay? Are we clear now?
Yes.
Just forget this part, please. Just forget this part. We are not going to go into the algorithm part, please. Okay? But if you look at both these images, and if you look at both these images, okay?
Yes,
and if you look at the bone, this bone is shining. It's not very pleasing to the eyes, is it? No. But the bone is very, very bright. This is how I remember. When the bone is very bright, it's not the bone window, full stop. When the bone is soothing to the eyes, it's the bone window. Does that help?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We understood, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Is the voice better now?
Sir, little bit better, sir.
Not much.
Not
Actually,
much.
I told you, ever since that hurricane thing happened here,
Yes,
our net connections all gone for a toss. Even after almost a month, we are with very bad net connections. Anyway, I just hope
Yes.
I can do whatever I can. So please remember this. Please remember this. Whether it's with contrast, without contrast is something different. We are not getting into the contrast business right now. But I want you to remember for this for the rest of your life, that when the bone is hitting your eye, it is not the bone window. When the bone is soothing, it's the bone window. Clear?
Clear, sir.
Now, have you gone back to the screen for the
Yes,
Radiant viewer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, and most of the time, to be very honest, most of the time when we see CT temporal, it's usually the bone window that we are seeing. With or without contrast is something else. Okay. It's usually we see the bone window because the bone is soothing here. Once again, for the last time, bone, I'm not liking the image, but this is not the bone window, though the bone is brighter. But this is the bone window for me. Okay.
Yes.
But just because it's the bone window does not mean that it cannot have good soft tissue differentiation. It has better bone differentiation. That is what it means, especially at the interface. Especially at the interface. See what is happening here. Look at the same image. See this interface. Can you see my cursor? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
This interface between bones. Hello.
Sir, we are not able to see the radiant viewer. Sir.
Not able to see the radiant viewer.
Yes, sir. We have to share it again. Sir.
Achha.
We are still seeing the bone window and brain window image.
Okay. I don't know what's wrong today. Now?
Yes, sir. We can see.
So, see, it is the interface which matters. Do you see this bone and soft tissue interface? Yes? Now,
Yes,
this
sir.
interface is not very sharp, is it? No. Let's look at the same over here. It's the same thing, you know. We see the mastoid air cells here. This is the posterior face of the petrous bone, temporal bone. So we see that the differentiation between the soft tissue, that is the intracranial tissue, and the bone is not as good as it is over here. So that is why this is, but over here, see how nice and sharp is the delineation of the bone from the soft tissue. Whether there is soft tissue differentiation in the bone itself is again not the point of discussion right now, correct? Yes, no,
yes,
hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So this is for the last time. This is the bone window. Just give me an answer in the chat. Is there any confusion regarding the bone window?
Sir, I actually asked. So we are getting the answer. No confusion.
No confusion.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Right. Because, you know, this is one very simple thing wherein everyone tends to make a mistake.
Yes.
Is this bone window? Is this bone window? Is this soft tissue window? No, this is bone window. Now, someone's requested to show them a bone window without contrast. So that could be a little difficult because I actually opened up a series where the contrast was important. So let me see if during the course I can show you. I'm sure we have other images. So let's not worry about what is happening inside now. As I said, axial scan of the head, concentrating on the temporal bone, preferably a bone window, taken at the level of either I can say the basal turn of the cochlea. When you can see the cochlea, always refer to the cochlea, please. Always. That's the usual dictum. Or you can even say taken at the level of the posterior semicircular canal. But the problem with the posterior semicircular canal is that it could be a superior end or an inferior part, correct? But the cochlea, the best part is you can say at the level of the basal turn of the cochlea. Always try to give a reference point, okay? And then you can elaborate from there. How long do you usually get to stay on a station, Dr. Prateek?
Sir, it's usually 5 minutes, sir.
Okay, so obviously you can't waste that 5 minutes telling the examiner that you can see the septum, you can see the maxillary sinus, and you can see, no, you obviously have to jump straight into the pathology, correct? If I'm right?
Correct.
Unless and until you feel that you've been actually given a normal CT scan and you're just being asked to play around with the normal CT scan, right?
Yes.
So, but just to give you an idea, so you can always say that this is the left side and this is the right side. We can actually see the mastoid antrum with the periantral air cells. This is the basal turn of the cochlea. This is the posterior semicircular canal. On the left side, I can see such and such structures. And whatever you need to say, I can see the tympanic bone, I can see the mandibular condyle in the glenoid fossa, I can see the same on the other side, I can see the greater wing of the sphenoid and the clivus and the basiclivus and things like that. I can see the occiput, but then we need to jump into the pathology. Okay, now before we come into the pathology, once again, what is the reference point for the density? What is the reference point for the density? The reference point for the density is the brain. So whatever is similar in density to the brain is called isodense. Whatever is lower in intensity, which means a negative image, is called hypodense. And whatever is more in density is hyperdense. So do we have structures here other than the brain which are hyperdense or hypodense and isodense? Yes, we do. The brain itself is isodense. The bone is hyperdense, whereas the mastoid air cells and the air in the external auditory canal or the maxillary antri or in the nasal pathway is hypodense. Clear? Okay. And what else can be isodense? The marrow within the bone is isodense. The muscles and the soft tissues are isodense, but in this particular scan, the vessels are not, because it's a contrast scan and we can see all these small blood vessels. So don't comment about that over here. Okay. So we have hyperdense, which is the bone. We have isodense, which is the brain and most of the soft tissues. And finally, we have hypodense, which is the air. Correct? And in the biggest problem we know with CT is very poor soft tissue differentiation. So we are not getting into that now. Now, what happens if I'm given, I'll stop the share now because the folder that I'm opening has a lot of, it is already marked. So I don't want you to see see what image I'm putting on screen. Okay. So let me choose an image for you. Okay. Let's correct. Fine. I'll share my screen with you now. Can you see the image?
Yes, sir.
Now see, something that I was saying. Where is the L written here?
On the wrong side. Yes, sir.
You say it's the wrong side. They used to say it's the right side.
It's right.
Because the patient is in a prone position.
Correct.
And it's way back in 2008. But this says L on the left on this side. So don't assume. Your examiner might be tricking you. He or she, they might put in an old image. So don't assume. Assumption is the mother of all dash ups. Okay.
Yes.
So don't assume in life. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And see, does this say plain study?
Yes, sir.
So this is bone window. Yes, because the different, see, it's a very old scan, correct? But I intentionally put it here so I can make you understand this difference between left and right. So do not compare the resolution quality of this image. This was probably an 8 slice machine or a 16 slice machine. This is way back in 2008. Okay. Yes. We are in 2020 now. Right. So, but still, this is a bone window. And there was this lady who had asked me to show us bone window without contrast. So this is what one of the images might look like. So now let's try and describe this image. Okay. Now let's try and describe this image. Now, obviously, I'm not going to say that this is an image of the head because I'm not seeing the entire head or the brain. What am I going to say? Sir, ma'am, this is an and I'm not going to use the term HRCT because it's a pretty old scan. It's a CT scan of the left temporal bone, probably the bone window sequence, coronal section of the left side, showing the presence of an iso-intense. This intensity here matches the intensity of the brain, right? So this is iso-intense. This is hyper, hypo, iso, hyper, hypo, iso. So a iso dense. See, again I made that mistake. Not intense. Iso dense shadow in the left attic and mastoid region, extending towards the adductus and the anterior attic, surrounding the ossicles from all the sides and extending into the round oval window area. Okay. Beyond that, you can also say, if you want, as I said, put in a level. So a left-sided CT coronal section of the left temporal bone at the level of the beginning of the basal turn of the cochlea, or at the level of the vestibule, showing whatever I mentioned earlier. Besides that, what we can also normally see, if you feel that the scrotum is eroded here, mention it. If you don't feel it's eroded, don't mention it. What you can definitely mention here is that we are not seeing any bony trabeculations here. So it has probably eroded. Most of the time, you have to again get used to using the word probably, simply because you are being given a single image from a see, it's the 23rd sequence, and the images sometimes, it's also sometimes written 1/25, 1/190, which means you are being given one image out of 190. So probably eroding the trabeculations between the mastoid air cells, probably eroding the stapes superstructure. Do not give a diagnosis, therefore cholesteatoma. No, 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 no. Neither CT nor MR can give you a diagnosis of cholesteatoma. It's an iso-dense pathological shadow, full stop. Let the examiner ask you, what could it be? Again, there, one more thing, Dr. Pratik, look, what's the thickness of, sorry, no, not this one, that's another one, sorry.
Yes,
This
yes.
is, this 5 centimeters is the scale here. So in case you wish to measure something, sorry, I was wrong. Yeah, so let the examiner ask you, so doctor, what do you think is the pathology? Well, sir, unless and until we know the clinical history and at least some of the clinical findings of the patient, it is very difficult to ascertain the actual pathology. But it could be one of the destructive lesions of the temporomastoid area. The most common being cholesteatoma. Weigh your words. I know it's very easy for me to say now. I mean, it's always this pleasure of having to see students suffer and become nervous when you are touching. I mean, you've been out of all this for more than 20 years, but we need to develop this habit, because this can be cholesteatoma. This could be a simple effusion which has been there for a long time. This could be, it could be an abscess in the forming, which could actually erode the trabeculations within the mastoid air cells. If the trabeculations were maintained, then it would have, the chances of it being an effusion would have been more, because effusion will not usually cause erosion of the trabeculations within the mastoid air, in the mastoid air system, the cellular system. The other thing, the other pathology, which though chronic might not cause There are three pathologies basically, which I always think of when I see an isodense shadow in the mastoid, but the mastoid trabeculations are cellular system trabeculations are well maintained. It's well maintained. And that is I'll again stop sharing the screen because I don't want to give out the pathologies. So A is simple effusion, B is granulation, and C is Cox. This is a pathologically confirmed patient of Cox who I had operated upon. So can you see the trabeculations maintained here? Yes.
Yes, sir.
But you can see the isodense shadow. Normally it should have been what? Hypodense, because the air cells are supposed to be hypodense, but they are
Yes.
not. So we can see this whole soft tissue extending even here. And see, though this entire soft tissue is totally surrounding the incus and the long process, can you still make out the stapes here? So this has not eroded the stapes either. Because what I have seen from the 2 or 3 cases of Cox granulomatous disease of the mastoid that I've dealt with is, it's a very hard, gritty, caseous material which tends to be everywhere, but it tends to cause very less destruction. This patient did not even have a perforation actually. This patient did not have a perforation. She was a 17-year-old girl, young girl. She had bilateral Cox mastoiditis. And it bled like anything when I tried removing all this. So anyway, once again, HRCT or CT temporal, but this is the right side, mind you, this time. This is not the left side anymore, okay? Of the right temporal bone, coronal section showing at the level of the beginning of the basal turn of the cochlea, showing an isodense shadow occupying the entire middle ear cavity or the mesotympanum, extending into the hypotympanum, and then extending backwards posteriorly and superiorly through the attic and through the adductus into the attic and the mastoid air cell system, with maintenance of the trabeculations of the mastoid air cell system, completely surrounding the ossicles but not showing any gross evidence of ossicular destruction or discontinuity. Okay. If then the examiner asks you what else, then you can say, sir, besides that, the normal anatomical structures that are visible include the superior semicircular canal, the lateral semicircular canal, the basal turn of the cochlea, the internal auditory canal, blah, 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 blah. All that we've all discussed earlier in our previous lectures. And what else should we expect here? If we see the long process, the body of the incus, and how do we know the body of the incus? All my friends who've attended the webinar on the coronal temporal organized by Dr. Sriharsha would remember, what is the long axis of this particular shadow that you are seeing? Is it vertically oriented or is it obliquely oriented? Answers in the chat, please. Answers in the chat, please. Is it vertically oriented or is it obliquely oriented? This shadow that we see here. I'll wait. Answers in the chat, please.
Obliquely placed, sir.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Right. So remember, if it is oblique, it's the body of the incus. And if it is vertical, it's the head of the malleus. I can't show you each and every representative slide. Otherwise, as I said, this would become a marathon session, and probably Dr. Sriharsha is going to spend all his money on this webinar alone. So this is obliquely oriented. So but always keep the word probably very handy. Keep the word probably very handy. So what else should we see here? If this is the body, the long process, incudostapedial joint, probably the old oval window, shouldn't we be seeing the facial nerve here? So this is where the facial nerve is. Can everyone see the cursor? Is it clear? Is the cursor visible? The arrow visible? Yes?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's visible.
So this is the facial nerve here. But unfortunately, the soft tissue is surrounding the tympanic segment of the facial nerve in such a manner that we are unable to, we know, why do we know that this is the facial nerve? Because remember, once again, if Dr. Sriharsha can provide the axial and the coronal temporal bone videos to our friends here, you see a depression on the underneath of the lateral semicircular canal. So this is the lateral semicircular canal, and this is the depression underneath the lateral semicircular canal. Remember, A leads to B, B leads to C, C leads to D. It's a chain. It's a chain. You identify two structures confidently. I can assure you, friends, you will identify the other structures with equal confidence. Just try and identify 2 or 3 structures in the entire image, which you are very confident. So this is the lateral semicircular canal. So right underneath the lateral semicircular canal is this depression, which actually lodges or houses the facial nerve. But because the shadow here is isodense and the facial nerve body itself is supposed to be isodense, we do not see a differentiation, though there are instances wherein this differentiation can be seen. This differentiation can be seen, and I'll show you that. Okay, Dr. Pratik, which screen are you seeing right now?
So the temporal bone screen, sir. Image.
The single image, not the presentation screen.
No, sir. No, sir.
Now?
So you have to reshare it, I think.
Oh, why is this happening today? I mean,
sir,
earlier we could just do it with the Alt tab. Why is this happening today? Anyway.
Sir, you have to do the complete screen sharing. Then it would work, sir.
How do you do the complete screen sharing then? Just tell me, because that will make life easier for me and for the rest of the people as well.
So for if you go to the screen share, sir, there are 3 options, sir. One is advanced option also, the second tab. In there, you can select share complete screen.
Advanced, but doesn't show portion of screen, music or sound.
Portion of screen, sir. So you can select portion of screen and then expand it to fit the whole screen, sir. There will be a green. So green borders will be there, and you have to expand it. That's it.
So that way I can keep shifting between screens, yes, and it will show you all of them?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now you can see it?
Now we can see, sir.
Do you see a PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so look at this. It's the same kind of a pathology, right? It's the same kind of a pathology, wherein obviously not that extensive, but what I'm trying to show you here is that once in a while, obviously this is more obvious in the anterior part of the facial nerve, the tympanic segment of the facial nerve, but you can see the bone over the facial nerve. Let me see, I think I had one more. No. Anyway, so if you can see bone along the lateral edge, or if we go back to the previous image, if you do not, if you need to see bone here for you to say whether it's dehiscent or not. So are we back on the image now?
So we are back.
Yeah. So in this particular, I mean, if I actually had the DICOM viewer, I could have zoomed in over here and then made, tried and make a comment whether I can see a thin rim of bone here. But if you don't comment on the fact that the facial nerve is dehiscent or not dehiscent. But the fact of the matter is that this depression that we see on the undersurface of the lateral semicircular canal is actually the area of the facial nerve of the tympanic segment of the facial nerve. Okay. So once again, I'll stop sharing the screen because I don't want to give out the pathology. And okay. I suppose I'll just keep working the normal way because, yeah. Right. So far, we were talking about the coronal sections. Now let's take an axial section. Once again, axial section of the, you can see R written here. Okay, you can see R written here, and obviously you know that this is the right side, but you've just reconfirmed the fact that this is not a mirror image. So you see the R written here, and you see L written here. So the axial high resolution axial CT scan of the right temporal bone, showing an isodense shadow in the right mastoid antrum extending anteriorly and causing erosion of the bone over the lateral aspect of the lateral semicircular canal. Okay, so this is what you need to say as far as at the level, I mean, if again, the level, at the level, axial CT scan at the level of the lateral semicircular canal. In fact, you can actually see the entire signet ring appearance of the lateral semicircular canal. This is the entire signet ring appearance. So an axial CT scan of the right temporal bone at the level of the right lateral semicircular canal, demonstrating an isodense shadow occupying the right mastoid antrum and extending anteriorly, causing an erosion over of the outer aspect of the right lateral semicircular canal. So over here, you can push your luck and put in a diagnosis of a lateral semicircular canal fistula. There is no doubt about the fact that this is a case of a lateral semicircular canal fistula. Okay, but we don't know what the pathology is, because again, I mean, a lateral semicircular canal fistula is not the property or the jamindari of a cholesteatoma. Any other destructive pathology, again, the moment I uttered the word destructive, my mind went back to the fact that I do not see the intercellular trabeculations or the septae here. So it is a destructive process, and something which can destroy the most dense bone in the human body is obviously a destructive process. So of the right lateral semicircular canal, okay, causing a fistula of the right lateral semicircular canal. Pathology, once again, sir, unless and until I have the clinical background, the symptomatology and the signs, it's very difficult to say. But considering the fact that most of the time we are dealing with patients of cholesteatoma, probably it's a case of cholesteatoma causing a right lateral semicircular canal fistula. Now for fistula, this is a very, very obvious fistula, but for a fistula, remember, on an HRCT, how much of an of the CT that we see is actually an HRCT, God only knows. I mean, I've specifically mentioned, this is obviously 10, 15 years back. Now, hardly are such scenarios occurring. But in spite of that, I've actually mentioned that I want an HRCT temporal bone for a fistulous communication with the labyrinth. I never mentioned that I'm specifically looking for a lateral semicircular canal fistula. No. I just mentioned query labyrinthine fistula, and yet I get scans which are maybe 1 millimeter apart or 1.5 millimeter apart, which is absolutely not acceptable. Not acceptable. Anyway, as per standard textbooks, on an axial section, for you to be absolutely sure that yes, there is a fistulous communication between the pathology and the labyrinth, it has to be present on three, not one, not two, not one, not two, but three contiguous scans. Three contiguous scans, you have to have an erosion of the bone over the lateral aspect or over any aspect of the labyrinth for you to say that yes, this is a fistula for sure. Besides that, you can see the posterior semicircular canal. You can actually see the vestibular aqueduct here. You can see the vestibular aqueduct here. You can see the internal auditory canal. You can very faintly, if you want, you can actually see the shadow of the facial nerve. This is the petrous apex with the marrow. This is the posterior fossa. This is the middle cranial fossa. So if the examiner asks you, okay, doctor, what do you think about the integrity of the tegmen? Sir, I think that the tegmen is well maintained, and you point this out. I think, sir, that the tegmen is well maintained. Otherwise, normally, if there was an erosion, on an axial scan, the tegmen erosion is obviously better visualized on a coronal scan, but on an axial scan, it is this bone that you need to pay attention to. So if this bone is eroded, then this is an erosion of the tegmen, which is leading to a communication between the middle ear, the mastoid middle ear complex, with the middle cranial fossa. Mind you, this is the middle, the petrous bone here. The petrous bone here is the partition on an axial section between the middle fossa and the posterior fossa. This is by no means the middle fossa. There is no part of the middle fossa here, and there is no part of the posterior fossa here. Okay, so this is middle fossa, this is posterior fossa. So once again, we can also comment whether there is any dehiscence or dehiscence, whatever your favorable pronunciation is, whether there is any dehiscence of the over the sigmoid sinus, or the, I prefer the term, honestly, I prefer the term lateral sinus. So whether there is any dehiscence of the bony plate over the lateral sinus or not. Clear? Dr. Pratik, how are we proceeding? Are we fine?
Yes, sir, we are fine, sir.
Okay. Let's see. Now, same thing, different view, different side. So this is a lateral, this is an HRCT or a CT scan temporal bone, but now on the left side, coronal section taken at the level of the vestibule and the beginning of the basal turn of the cochlea, showing an isodense shadow in the attic and the upper part of the mesotympanum. In the attic and the upper part of the mesotympanum, eroding the bone over the lateral aspect of the left semicircular canal. So this is a fistulous communication, a left lateral semicircular canal fistula, but this is the left side and this is a coronal section. Okay, doctor, what do you think about the tegmen here? Well, sir, the tegmen does seem intact, but I have a bit of a doubt about this area, and unless and until I have the succeeding and the preceding images, it is very difficult for me to say whether the tegmen could have been eroded here or not. Okay, doctor, what do you think is this? Do you think it's the cholesteatoma here? I mean, do you think it is this pathology? Now, we all know it's very difficult for cholesteatoma as such to come out into the external auditory canal. We can always suck it out, but cholesteatoma cannot as such come out into the external. I mean, you don't see it as a mass in the external auditory canal, because normally it is expected that you have examined the patient before sending the patient for a scan and you've done a suction clearance. So this cannot be cholesteatoma. Can this be a granulation polyp, which is a very, very common finding? We do find a polypoidal mass, reddish in color, sometimes scaring the wits out of us for us to consider whether it's a glomus or not, but we do find it in chronic inflammatory processes. No. Because if you look at it, it's got a linear border, and this border is going parallel to the roof of the external auditory canal. So basically what is happening here is that the skin over the external auditory canal wall has thickened because of chronic inflammation. So this is secondary chronic inflammatory soft tissue stenosis. This is chronic. Look at the words. It's very difficult. I can understand it's very difficult at a younger age with a burlesque looking examiner in front of you who's out to eat you up that day, to pay attention to your words. But it's a habit you need to inculcate. It's the habit which differentiates the wheat from the chaff. So this is probably a post-inflammatory or a chronic, secondary chronic inflammatory soft tissue stenosis of the bony part of the external auditory canal. Clear? So this is a chronic inflammatory, secondary chronic inflammatory stenosis. Okay. So I'll just stop the screen share once again, and I'll pick up something different for you now. Okay, correct. Right. So right now we saw something.
So
I
we are
mean,
not. Yes.
yeah. I didn't start share. I don't want to give. I mean, I am a little bit of a drama baz, So it's okay. Okay. So here you can actually see that the bony plate of the sigmoid sinus or the lateral sinus is eroded. So this is just to help you compare with the previous section, previous scan. Okay, this is just to help you compare. In the scan previous to the previous one, wherein we saw the fistula in the lateral semicircular canal on the axial section on the right side, the bone over the lateral sinus was nice and smooth, but here we definitely see an indentation. Dr. Pratik, it's been an hour. I mean, I don't mind continuing, but how long am I supposed to continue?
So you can
you have a next.
Yes, sir. So you can have 10-15 minutes.
So you tell me what, I mean, does this give you a gross idea about CT temporal as to how to describe a CT temporal?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Exactly.
I mean, is this what you wanted?
Yes, sir.
So what is it that you want me to discuss in the next 10 minutes? And I'll try and find images accordingly. Tell me that and I'll do it accordingly.
So we can ask audience.
Yes, absolutely. Let me turn on the chat here.
Yes.
Provided I have it, handy, provided I have it handy.
So the most common questions on CT temporal would be vestibular schwannoma, like bilateral vestibular schwannoma.
Okay. On CT temporal.
CT temporal, yes, sir.
But CT temporal, someone's asking landmarks of the temporal bone. I mean, that's a complete lecture in itself. So
yes,
I'm so sorry, Dr. Vibhor Kumar, but you'll have to look up the videos on the net that we have. I mean, I have some of my videos and there are other videos as well. I mean, just mentioning the landmarks of the temporal bone in its entirety.
Yeah, that would be another.
I mean, it's a lecture in itself. See, Dr. Pratik, as far as vestibular schwannoma is concerned, I mean, I don't do CT scans for vestibular schwannoma. I mean, because that's not the modality images. That is not the modality of investigation. Okay, we'll go back to what we were discussing before we started the meeting, right?
Yes, sir. So if you have MRI images of vestibular schwannoma.
Yeah. That I'll definitely show. Yes, remember that patient I discussed with you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So I'll stop the screen share. Yeah. Yes, please. Yeah.
And if you can just tell us the facial nerve course on a HRCT temporal bone, that would be sufficient, I think.
Okay. Let me first pick up the, yeah. One minute, please. I'll first pick up the image and then I'll share the screen with you.
Yes.
sorry. Okay. Can you see it? Hello?
Yes, sir, we can see, sir.
So this is a huge vestibular schwannoma. Okay, this is a T2 weighted image. This is a T2 weighted image. Why? Because if I go from top to bottom, I can see that the white matter appears gray and the gray matter appears white. So this is a T2 image. Obviously the CSF is hyper intense. So this is, and now it's the term intense. So this is a T2 weighted image, and you can see it in the annotation here. It's a T2 weighted image. And as I go down, I can see a huge vestibular schwannoma. You can always make the measurements here. You can always make the measurements here. So it's about 3.29 centimeters, 3.45 centimeters here, and 2 centimeters, 2.5 centimeters here. So this is a huge vestibular schwannoma. In the left, cerebellopontine angle, and also the left internal auditory canal, which is compressing not only on the brainstem, but also the cerebellar peduncle and causing a midline shift of the ventricle. Okay, so this is an image. See how huge it is. As we go up, you can actually see what we call a supratentorial extension. Okay, so this is a huge vestibular schwannoma, right? This is a huge vestibular schwannoma. This is a T2 image. And if I can show you, okay, I think we are running out of time. So this is a T1 post contrast. This is a T1 post contrast coronal view. Okay, and we know that the vestibular schwannoma takes up the contrast and shows a hyper intense signal, and it's on the left side, and see how it is pushing the brainstem away. So it's majorly pushing the brainstem away. But surprisingly, this, and why do I say post contrast? Look at the blood vessels here. Though this does not say anything over here, it does not. Why is it T1? Why is it T1? Because the CSF is black, though you do not have those images of the sulci and the gyri, but you can see that on contrast, the vestibular schwannoma enhances. On contrast, the vestibular schwannoma has enhanced. Correct? So is this enough for the vestibular schwannoma, Dr. Prateek?
Yes, sir.
I'll just go to that thing about the facial nerve that you asked me. Just give me a minute. I have it in my presentation. I'll show you the entire course of the facial nerve. Yeah, here it is. I'll just stop sharing the screen for a moment, please.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, it depends upon how much of the course of the facial nerve can you see. Well, this is an excellent image where besides the mastoid segment, you are actually seeing all the parts of the facial nerve. Obviously not the intracanalicular part, the cisternal part, because that's visible on an MRI. So you can see the labyrinthine segment here. You can see the labyrinthine segment here. You can see the tympanic segment from there, this anterior end to the posterior end, and then it's going to turn downwards inferiorly to form the second genu. You can see the geniculate ganglion here. You can see the geniculate ganglion here formed by the labyrinthine segment and the backward turn, and then the tympanic segment. And not only that, you can actually see the canal for the greater superficial petrosal nerve. And we know that the labyrinthine segment lies between the vestibule posteriorly and the cochlea, basal turn of the cochlea anteriorly. So this is as far as the image of the facial nerve on an axial section, the entire course of the facial nerve is concerned. This is the course of the entire facial nerve only in the tympanic segment. If you look here, you can actually faintly see the shadow of the lateral semicircular canal. So we know that the tympanic segment of the facial nerve comes in close contact with the lateral semicircular canal. And for the mastoid segment, you actually have to look at the I'll go back to the, yeah, you actually have to look at the coronal sections. So this is the coronal section of the left side, and you can see the second genu, you can see the entire mastoid segment, and you can even see the stylomastoid foramen, whereas the same segment appears at a circular shadow on the axial section. So this is the entire facial nerve of the mastoid segment. So for you to see the mastoid segment in its entirety, you need the coronal. Remember, parallel, perpendicular, entirety, circular. Remember those philosophies clearly, and you'll not make a mistake. So for the mastoid segment, coronal. For the rest of the segments, axial. What else, Dr. Pratik, or should we stop now?
Yes, sir. I think we can we can start the next session, I think.
Okay.
So if any member have any doubt, they can just send it on the chat section. And I don't think they are. So I think we can start the next session. So thank you so much, Dr. Manoj sir. So
Not
kindly be with us, because at the end we can take few questions.
You want me to stay with you? Because
okay, sir, you can. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so you can always send me the questions later on, yes, and sir, I'll send you the answers. You know, how yes, long is your next section?
Sir, 30 minutes.
Oh no, I'm sorry, I'll have to leave now.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay.
Yes, right. Sir. Thank you so much for coming, sir.
Thank you. Not at all. Good evening to everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, sir. Bye, sir. So our next session is next speaker is Dr. Priyajit Panigrahi, sir. He has done his DNB. He has done his MBBS from MKCG Medical College. He has done his DNB from Kochi. He was a senior resident at SKN Medical College, Pune. He had worked with KKR ENT Research Center, Apollo Specialty Hospital, Chennai, and now he is working as chief consultant at Tata Steel Medica Hospital. He is also the author of most famous ENT OSCE book, which is named as ENT OSCE Atlas. So we have recorded actually his session, so we will start the session. And meanwhile, Dr. Priyajit sir is also with us, so he will take questions. So Priyajit sir, can we start the session, sir?
Am I audible, no?
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir.
Okay. Good evening, everybody.
Yes, sir. So
okay,
I will
go on.
Start. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Can you hear the voice?
Yeah, I can hear.
This is particularly more important for the PG students, DNB PG students, and MS also. I would like to tell about the theory exam thing, how to prepare for the theory exam. Because already previous webinar, we had a talk about OSCE thing by Dr. Nehasa and Dr. Zakir Hussain. So how to prepare for a DNB theory exam. So there are some tips. So what we know since childhood, there is no substitute without hard work. Actually, I would like to modify this. This is an old concept. The real thing is there is no substitute without an organized hard work. Because lots of people doing hard work, but few only going to the top. It is because of the organized, means the planned thing. So you have to plan for how to do the hard work. That is the important thing. Then second thing is select only the important textbooks and make notes for all important points. It is important because when you are joining post-graduation, you will have a 3-year course. So during first year, you will accompanying a senior or a teacher, means any assistant professor or whoever work you under whom you will work. So the thing is, you will not get time to study. So whenever you are getting time, so you have to make a habit of spending at least 1 hour every day. So there are thousands of books. So it is important that you have to choose the important books only without wasting time with unnecessary books. And how to know what are the important books? You can ask your seniors or your teachers. So this is important. You have to find out the important textbooks and make notes from all the important points. Making note is important because it will help for the last minute study. You can't read whole book during the last minute study. Then the important thing is make a schedule and work out how much time you need for each subject. This is also important. Haphazardly doing studies may not be helpful. So make a schedule and complete one by one. Then give enough rest to your brain. Our brain is like an engine, so you need to. Our brain need a break. Just like a car engine, when getting hit, you need to stop the car. So our brain also like that. Then one more important thing is some people prefer to study alone and some prefer to study group wise, which is combined study. So I would suggest you, it is always important to do combined study, group study. It is because you will get lots of questions from your different friends, that is variety of questions. Then you will get moral support. Then also all of you have the same goal. All of your have motive is same. So it will help you anyway. And also multiple brains will use for the same thing, means definitely it is advantage. Then stress control. Stress is also important thing. But any exam you will get stress. Little stress is required actually, which will give you a jail-like thing. But too much stress is problematic. That's why stress control is important. You make friends, always think positive, go out, relax, do meditation, do yoga. You can manage with that. Then don't afraid to ask your doubts, even if it is a silly one. It is a very common thing when you are thinking it is an easy question, why should I ask? If it is easy, then why you don't know the answer? Actually, it is easy. Maybe you're thinking it is easy, maybe difficult for somebody else. So that's why every question is important. There is nothing easy or difficult. You open to ask. Then get plenty of sleep, that is to make your brain rest, already said. Then how to prepare the night before. It is also important because some friends are doing whole night study and waking up early morning tired. So that is always the important thing is never a day before exam, don't do night study. Just stay calm, pick all essential items, your pen, admit card, identity card required. Then avoid books as much as possible. Don't do much study. Here, in this time, our sleep is more important. Then get up early, have breakfast, wear comfortable clothes. These are also important things. Then when waiting outside the exam room, here also you will see people will take their books and outside the exam hall, they will keep on studying. Actually, these are also not necessary because the more you discuss, the more you will get confused. At that time, you need to make your brain calm only. So don't avoid temptation to discuss at that time. Just sit quietly outside the room, breathe deeply, avoid looking at your notes. Once inside, read the exam instruction very carefully. This is also an important thing. Then allocate time for each questions and keep an eye on the clock always. So these are the few important points for the theory exam. After all, you need to complete your books and always be confident. Because remember one thing, you only can do your best. Okay. Now coming to our 2 stations, which is in DNB practical exam, very, very important thing. One is counseling station and other is examination station. I have included three counseling stations, three important counseling stations, and one examination station, which is most important, how to examine a tracheostomized patient. Because these are frequently coming and people are making most of the mistakes there. And there are lots of negative marks in these two things, counseling station and examining a tracheostomized patient. That's why I've included these two things. So coming to the counseling station, what is the difference between counseling station and history taking station? That both have, you will present and a patient will be there. The difference is in counseling station, in history station, you will to get information from the patient, asking about the disease and get information. But in counseling session, you need to provide information. You need to tell the patient what to do, what not to do. And second important thing is, in counseling session, there will be an examiner who will observe you, how you talk, your language, and everything. They will examine you. That's why counseling session is always an important session. And that does not mean you will get, no, you need to fear or don't be panic always, be confident. And you just start. And always remember, in every session, there will be a question paper. So don't forget that, because there are some hints inside the question which you will miss and you will get into negative marks. So first counseling session, how will you counsel a patient of age 55 years planned for total laryngectomy in a 3-day period for a case of stage 3 glottic carcinoma? Okay, so first thing is introduce yourself. I am Dr. Prijit Panigrahi. I am your doctor. You have been posted for surgery. You are diagnosed with this. And so we are planning for do this surgery. So you need to explain that what are the advantage, what are the things the patient should know regarding the surgery. Like you need to tell about the anatomy and physiology of larynx, just only one word, like larynx is the airway. So we'll remove the larynx, means this is the voice box. So once we remove it, you may not talk. So this is the important thing. Also, then for surgery, the surgery will take about 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours, and you need to do a tracheostomy here. What is tracheostomy? Just one thing. After surgery, you need to breathe through. There is an opening we'll make here, and we will breathe through this opening, because you cannot breathe through nose. And about anesthesia before surgery, the important thing is fitness of the surgery. So an anesthetic doctor will come and examining you and tell you whether you are fit or not. Then after the surgery, you will shift to ICU. You may shift to ICU for some 1 day or something, and then later you will be shifted to general ward. And hospital stay may be 5 to 7 days. And we will tell about this. And the one important thing is about the complication. Don't forget to tell about the complications. Like there is chance of first is you may need a ventilator. You may not need also. And about the fistula, there may be chance of leakage. There may be chance of wound infection. So you need to do just one words like. Then about, as it is a cancer, then after healing of the wound, you may need a radiotherapy also. Then after removal of the surgery, you will not speak. You cannot speak because we have removed the voice box. So you may need a speech therapy, and you need to explain about the voice rehabilitation options like tracheoesophageal prosthesis. You will need to put a device here so that you can talk. Then other prostheses are like electronic larynx. You will put and hold and touch here, and you can talk. Then one important thing is a tracheostomized post-laryngectomy patient never allow yourself alone. So a family support is important. You need to counsel to the relatives if they are there. Then not swimming is not recommended. Then you need to follow up every month or every 2 months. Then at last, don't forget to tell any doubt you are free to ask me. This is also important. So I think each session is 10 minutes. So you need to at least 15 points. The more important 15 minutes, you need to explain the patient. So this is about counseling of a total laryngectomy patient which is posted for a 3 days period. Then second counseling session is about to the mother, because this is a 3-year-old child, you cannot counsel the child. So counsel to the mother of a 3-year-old child complaining of decreased hearing due to otitis media with effusion. So as same as introduce yourself, I am Dr. Vijit Panikre, I am your doctor, and your children has a problem that you have got in the middle ear of the ear got fluid has accumulated. Then you have to tell about the anatomy and physiology of middle ear ventilation. Means this is external ear, then middle ear, then inner ear. Between external ear and middle ear there is a membrane, and in the middle ear there is a connection to the our oral cavity and nose, which is known as nasopharynx. So if there will be any obstruction like due to adenoid hypertrophy adenoid or hypertrophy tonsil, then the fluid accumulation, the fluid not able to discharge. So it will get accumulated in the middle ear. So the child will get hearing loss. So this is about the middle ear ventilation. Then first we'll start with antibiotics, antihistaminics, and nasal drops to make the fluid drain out. But if it fails, we'll wait for a few weeks. If it fails, then he may require a surgery like a tonsillectomy or adenoidectomy, or he may need a myringotomy, where we will just puncture the tympanic membrane and drain out the fluid. So that, and we'll put a grommet, which is a ventilation tube, and which will come extrude within 6 months to 9 months. If it won't come, then we'll remove it in the OPD. So then about the complication of surgery, doing the myringotomy, there is chance that permanent perforation syndrome means sometimes what happens, it will heal, the tympanic membrane will heal itself, but sometimes the perforation will stay. In that case, the children may get an elective tympanoplasty at a later date. And after the surgery, swimming is okay, but don't allow water to put inside the ear. So better swimming with ear plug. Then why the surgery is important? The mother may ask you why the surgery is important. First thing is, if there is failure of conservative management. Second is, there will be a loss of hearing, and at this age, if the patient will compromise hearing, then there will be suffer from speech, language delay, and behavioral problem. That's why surgery is important. Then you have to fill up a consent form. Then any other doubt you may feel free to ask. These are the important points you need to tell, and also tell about the follow-up things. Then third case, it is about the radiotherapy of a head and neck carcinoma, how to counsel a patient with head and neck carcinoma for radiotherapy. Every session you have to introduce yourself, that is an important thing. Then tell about what is radiotherapy. Radiotherapy is a X-ray, nothing but X-ray. It is a high energy X-ray that has potential to kill cancer cells. It can be used before as pre of radiotherapy, or during the same time, or after as post of radiotherapy. There are mainly 3 types: external beam radiotherapy, brachytherapy, and stereotactic radiosurgery. Then we'll decide what kind of radiotherapy is required for this particular case. And you need to wear a hospital gown. We'll mark the radiation site and arrange proper position. And nothing to worry, because radiotherapy does not hurt. After the procedure, you may need to undergo clinical examination, mainly some blood test, because radiotherapy is not selective, means it will kill the cancer cells as well as the normal cells also. So we need to monitor about the leukocyte count, platelet counts, hemoglobin counts. So regular testing is also important. Then about the skin care, radiotherapy can damage the skin. That's why we need to warm with lukewarm water, then avoid chemicals, then use moisturizers, and don't shave, no shaving. Wear loose clothes always, and avoid sunscreens. Then one important thing is high protein diet is always, post radiotherapy diets are always high protein diet, because it will help in regeneration of the damaged cells, damaged normal cells. Then there is chance of hair loss also. Then there is chance of decreased sexual activity. So it is advisable to avoid conception for at least 6 months. Then there is a chance of infection to the mouth oral cavity. So you need to care of them, and dental care and mouth care is also important. For that, you need to gargle, and if there will be ulcers, you may use some Nystatin cream. And also always add one last point always, if you have any doubt, feel free to ask. So this is about radiotherapy counseling. Then last is examination station. About this is how to examine a post-tracheostomized patient. Post-tracheostomized patient examination station, it is like a counseling station. You need to examine the patient, but there are some important points where you get negative marks. Like there is, as I said, there is always a question paper. And in the question paper, there may be some instructions like wear mask, wear gloves, and always look at the surrounding of the patient. There may be some sanitizer. Don't forget to use the sanitizer. Don't forget to, if there is mask, if there is gloves, always wear the mask and gloves before touching the patient. And also in examination session, there will be an examiner who is observing you continuously. Okay. So first introduce yourself. I am Dr. This, and I'm going to examine your tracheostomy thing. Then wear mask and gloves if provided. Then check for secretions, stoma granulation, and tightness of thread. You have to know how to check the tightness of thread by putting second, 2 finger, 3 finger. Okay. Then always auscultate. These things contain negative mark. If you forget auscultation the tracheostomized patient, you will get a negative mark. So always auscultate whenever you are facing a tracheostomized patient. Then stoma care, look at the stoma, and if there is obstruction, you will feel, then clean with saline. If that is also you observe, if there is a cotton, if they have provided a saline thing, just put wet the gauze and just wash it over it. Then evaluate vitals, connect pulse oximeter if it is provided. Okay. Then inform patient prior to suctioning. Suction is if provided, just you need to do the suction, and the suctioning is not important here. Before suctioning, you need to tell the patient. That is important here. If you forget to tell the patient, then you will get a negative mark. Then use catheter of size half the tube diameter. So you take the diameter, always observe the tracheostomy, the diameter is written at the side of the flanks of the tracheostomy. So those are also important. Then before the deflate the tube, you may tell during the thing also, because the examiner is observing you, you may tell these things also. If suction is provided, if the suction machine is provided, then you in front, just as the talk with the patient as the examiner will hear properly. Okay. Then connect the catheter with low pressure machine, which is 10 millimeter mercury. Then catheter should enter maximum of 15 centimeter for 15 seconds. These are all important. So always look at the surroundings. What are the things they have provided? If something is there, then you have to use that. If catheter is provided, then they want to show this. Okay, that is the important thing. Then remove and keep over saline. If secretion is thick, use saline with sodium bicarbonate. At last, re-inflate. First deflate, then at the end, re-inflate. Don't forget to re-inflate the patient. So this is an important thing, how to examine a tracheostomy patient. Then I would like to thank the SOSU group and our DNB mental group, Dr. Pratik Parwal, and wish you all the best, all the exam candidates. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Priyajit, sir.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. And we have a surprise also. Dr. Priyajit is going to release a new book. I think, sir, you want to tell by yourself, sir?
Yeah. Actually, since I think our last edition is 2014, I think. So it's a long time. So after 6 years, we are planning to publish our next edition with lots of inputs inside. So it will be for the December 2020 session. So for the July candidates, you can read this present book only. So that we can enough time for 6 month times to prepare it a very well new version of this book. And any help, any you want to contact me, then I will provide you my number and my email also. I will chat here, and you can contact me anytime.
And
Okay.
you can also ask questions on Facebook. There is a group, DNB ENT OSCE. So,
Yeah, one more. There is a Facebook group, DNB and Tioski. I think lots of people are there. There are more than 5,000 people are there. Anybody is not there, you can add. I will accept the request, and you can actively participate there. There are lots of teachers are there asking lots of questions. You will just keep yourself active in that group. Then it will be very helpful. And any updates also, I am updating there everything. Yeah, I am giving my
yes,
number. Those who are requiring books, you can mail me.
yes, sir.
Okay,
So,
thank you very much.
yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for coming. And
Yeah, thank you very much.
tomorrow we have a session on recent advances. So we will be covering sleep. So we will show you the videos of DICE, surgical options for OSA, post-op management, and recent advances in sleep. So Dr. Vikas Agarwal will be conducting this, and Dr. Dhanraj from Bangalore will be taking up history, examination, types of polysomnography, how to read a sleep study report, and what are CPAP and BiPAP. So, and this Saturday we have Dr. Prasoon Mishra, sir, from Bharati Vidyapeeth, Pune. He will be talking on various stations like drug, OSCE stations, osteology, X-ray, PET scans for the OSCE stations. So, thank you so much for
Yeah,
coming
somebody
here.
asking me about the radiotherapy counseling slides, and that I think the tips for the theory exam. Can you share this
Sir,
slide to
yeah, yes,
everyone?
sir. I
Yeah.
will say, I will share, sir. I
Okay,
will share.
okay. And rest all counseling sessions are there in my book. Okay, once you get the book, you will know everything.
Yes, sir.
Okay, welcome.
Okay, so thank you so much, sir. And
Okay,
thank
welcome.
you to all the members. Thank you to Sri Harsha Foundation. Thank you, Dr. Bhargav. Thank you, Dr. Manoj Agarwal, sir. And thank you, Dr. Prejit, sir. So we will meet next week, tomorrow, for a sleep session. So thank you so much. Take care.